Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 163. Today I'm speaking with wildlife and seascape artist Naomi Jenkin. Naomi's art captures the incredible details of the ocean as well as wildlife and pets. Naomi takes inspiration from the natural world to create artwork which connects people with wildlife and supports wildlife conservation projects around the world. Naomi has been a finalist in the Wildlife Artist of the Year competition, which was run by the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation. In our conversation, we really dive deeply into Naomi's art practice and how she goes about creating these incredibly realistic pieces. We talk about the importance of connecting with nature, especially with the ocean, to maintain her well-being, as well as the flow of inspiration for her artwork. We talk about what artists can do to help make change in our world, and she tells the story of a recent adventure on the Baltic Sea. Let's listen. Naomi, thank you so much for being here with me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
I would love to go back in time and talk to you about your earliest memories of nature. I wonder if nature was part of your upbringing and part of your early life.
Yeah, it definitely was a huge part of my my upbringing. So my house where I grew up was right by the sea, and it was it's in a county called Sussex, which is on the southeast coast of England, and we were on the edge of the South Downs, which is like this series of hills. So it was amazing for doing walks and bike rides, and then living right by the ocean. My family's really into sailing, so I grew up learning to sail dinghies from a really young age. And we had a fantastic garden that had loads of these thick hedgerows in it. And as a kid, I used to make dens inside the hedges. And I would create leaf art, as I called it. So I would mix up like mud with water or chalk with water. So I'd have brown and white paint. And then I would paint that onto leaves with sticks and create all these little pictures. And
That's amazing.
I also used to stitch leaves together to make like little purses. So I'd use long daisies or bits of grass and would stitch them together. And I remember one time when I was probably about 7 maybe, my dad was an artist and he exhibited in some local galleries, and he was saying how impressed he was with this little purse I had made out of leaves. And I remember asking him if he thought the gallery would want to exhibit it.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And he was like, maybe, I don't know. So yeah, I used to love just sitting in the hedges and watching the birds and viewing the garden from my little den. Yeah.
What delightful memories. Oh my goodness. Tell me about having an artist for a dad. Did you sort of deliberately follow him into this career?
No, it was, so he sort of went into an art career after he worked as an architect and interior designer in London for quite a few years, and then there was a big recession and he was made redundant, and so he had done art at college. He'd done like a degree in fine art, and so he sort of fell back on that as a career. He started doing some paintings and managed to get into a local gallery, and they were really popular. He was doing landscapes of all the local scenery, and so he I think that started when I was about 5 years old, and he had a really successful art career. I mean, he still does it now. And but I did see throughout his career the ups and downs of art as a career. When economic times are good, his paintings were flying off the shelves, but there were quite a few times when people were struggling for money and he might go for months without selling anything. which was obviously quite stressful. And my parents had to really budget and learn to live off savings, at hard times and that. So when I came to choosing a career, I sort of had two avenues that I was really interested in and inspired by, one of which was music and one was art. And I actually ended up going down the music route because I was a little bit scared of the roller coaster ride that can be, a self-employed art career. So yeah, I ended up being a sound engineer for 12 years, and my art kind of took a bit of a back seat. And then because I was having to live in London or quite close to the city, I was really missing the whole outdoors aspect of my life. It was something that I was really craving, and I needed to get back into my life to be happy again. So yeah, in a long roundabout way, I ended up coming back to art, and I quit my full-time job as a sound engineer to pursue art, and was able to move back to the country and be outdoors a lot more, and started my art career.
Did you have training in making art, or is it something you just came to through your own practice?
Just through my own practice. I only took art as far as GCSE, which is kind of secondary school exams. So it was all just being self-taught, lots of watching YouTube videos, reading people's reviews on, what materials to use and techniques and stuff, asking my dad for pointers as well. But no real formal training. Just sort of finding my own way.
Yeah, so you said you moved back to the country. I love on this podcast to talk with my guest about their nearby nature and their place. And I'd love for you to describe the landscape and the environment and the nature you have access to where you live.
Yeah, so I live in a little village called Cubitt on the north coast of Cornwall. And 5 minutes down the road from my house is a beach called Holywell Bay, and it's a stunning sandy beach. There's rugged granite cliffs all along the coast of Cornwall, and there's a footpath that follows the cliff top, so you can walk all the way along. You see all kinds of seabirds, you can see seals. We sometimes get whales and dolphins down here as well, so you can sometimes watch those. And yeah, it's just a really stunningly beautiful place. I absolutely love it. Quite often go down and watch the sunset on the beach. I walk my dog every day along the coast path.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love it.
I really, really, since I was a teenager, have wanted to do that. Is it called the Southwest Path? The big walk down.
The Southwest Coast Path. Yeah.
Yes,
it's a long way to do the whole thing.
It takes a month, maybe, or maybe more. It's something that's on my.
I would say more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only done short sections of it. I haven't done the whole thing. But yeah, it is stunning. Like every part of it, I think.
That's on my to do before I die list.
Yeah. And I spent a lot of time in the sea as well, so that's another big passion of mine. So I love surfing and there's actually quite a lot of beaches really close by here. So there's Holywell, which is just down the road, but then there's a lot of others just, within 10-15 minutes drive. So yeah, probably about 3 times a week I'd manage to get in the sea for a surf or a swim. Or
That's beautiful. I would love to talk to you about this idea of nature time in the ocean, time in nature, and how that fuels your creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're self-employed and running your own business, or just anyone really in living in today's world, it's quite easy for your head to become this really kind of busy place, isn't it? We're having so much information thrown at us all the time, and it's quite hard to switch off. And so for me, getting out into nature is my time when I can just be present, not be distracted by all these external factors, and just be present and be looking around you. And I just find like it instantly calms you. And just gives me headspace to think. And quite often, just having that space to think is when I get some of my best ideas for art to create. And it just makes me feel a lot more relaxed and refreshed, and yeah, it just makes me feel happier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the ocean is, you do a lot of different things in your art practice, but the ocean features really heavily. And I'd love for you to talk about that, oceanscapes, and just how your experiences in the ocean then translate physically into your paintings. Do you take photographs? I'd love to hear that, translating your ocean experiences into oceanscapes.
Yeah, I started surfing when I was 32, so quite late, I suppose, by most standards.
What motivated you?
So I went on honeymoon to the Maldives, and there was a surf break right opposite one of the bars. And so we would sit there having a drink, watching these surfers, and I was just absolutely entranced by it. And I was like, oh my god, that looks so fun, why don't I do this? And I was like, I live in Cornwall, which is like the surf capital of the UK. Why do I not surf? So as soon as I got home, I booked some surf lessons, and me and my husband took up surfing. And honestly, the minute I stood up on a board, I was absolutely hooked. And it's honestly one of the hardest things I've tried to learn, but it's also one of the most rewarding.
What does it feel like when you're standing there and gliding down a wave?
It feels incredible, but do you know what? It's not actually, I find for me, it's not just about standing up, going along a wave. It's the whole experience. It's paddling out. I see some incredible sights out there. Sometimes I've been paddling out and a wave has risen up in front of me, and the whole wave face is just filled with jellyfish, which looks stunningly beautiful. A little bit scary because they sting a little bit. They're not like Australian jellyfish where, I would think I was about to die. These are like kind of really tiny little stings, so it's not really going to hurt you that much, but it just looks stunning. You're just like, wow. And then I've had seals come up and say hello to me, literally like pop up about a metre away from me and then swim under my board and pop up the other side. And I've been out there early morning where there's stunning pastel skies around and a pod of dolphins has gone past me. And so it's just the whole experience, from just paddling out, floating around, seeing all these things, feeling so calm and relaxed. I mean, sometimes it's not calm and relaxing. If it's a bit rougher, you can get really tumbled around and kind of be thrown around like a rag doll, which is fun in itself.
A different experience.
But it gives you so many things. It makes you face your fears as well, and I think gives you a bit more confidence. Because the sea is quite an intimidating space sometimes, and sometimes you try and paddle out and it's really hard work, and you just have to kind of trust that if you keep going you'll get there. And so it sort of teaches you quite a lot of things in terms of resilience and persistence. Like I said, facing your fears.
It must be a physical workout as well, like a deeply
hugely
involved
I think
physical
it uses every
experience.
Single muscle in your body. Some I didn't even know I had. And then the community as well. I've met so many like-minded people and fellow creatives as well through surfing. It seems to attract a lot of creative people. So a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, poets, like all kinds really.
And you come to that just through conversations while you're in the surf?
Yeah, I joined a local surf club. So I met a lot of women through that. It was a female surf club. And then when you're out in the water, you just meet a lot of, just get chatting to people. Or, you get out of the water and you see someone's got a really good wave. So you say, oh, that was a really good wave. And then you start chatting with them. And, so I've built some really long-lasting friendships through it. And
that
then,
is so cool.
And then in terms of translating that into my art, it's just, you can probably tell it's quite an inspiring thing for me. The ocean and just all its varying states and that. And so when I'm painting it, I'm almost like reliving those experiences, just simple things like the way the light shines through a wave face as it breaks. I'll still have those images in my mind. So even though I'm working from photographs, I'm drawing on those personal experiences of actually being out there and being literally thrown about by the waves, so you really feel and experience the motion and how the water moves and how it feels.
Yes.
Yeah, how the water's like sucked up the face of a wave before it breaks over, and the currents and riptides and everything. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And tell me about your process for creating something as detailed, because these oceanscapes are just minute detail, like in every way they could be photographs. And I'd love to hear the steps in your process. Do you find a photograph online? Do you take your own photographs? And then how do you do it? Do you sketch before you paint? Tell me all the steps in creating something so detailed.
Yeah, so they're all my own photographs.
Oh, wow.
So I go out and take lots of different photographs. Sometimes one photo doesn't quite work, so I might move things around or take elements from one and combine them with another. Because waves are always moving, so sometimes you don't capture that exact moment where the waves stack up just how you want them to. So sometimes I combine elements from a few different photographs. And then, I sketch it out onto the canvas, just freehand with a pencil. And then once I'm happy with that, I sort of lay down blocks of colour with oil paints. And then it's just kind of building up layers on top of each other, and each one kind of gets a little bit more detailed. Working with oil paints is quite fun because it being a fluid medium, it sort of acts a bit like water in a way. You can push it around, and I use my fingers a lot for painting. So I literally like smudge my fingers across the canvas to blend all the colours in kind of the motion that I want.
Well, that must give a special effect because, I mean, water is fluid and the paint is fluid, and I imagine that it adds an authenticity to the flow of the water. Yeah,
definitely. And when you think of water, there is physical layers going on in that as well, because you have, areas where the sand is mixed up with the water, but then on the top of the water you have the foam trails, and so you are almost kind of building it from the, background to the foreground, if you like, or from the deepest parts to the parts nearest to you, kind of replicating how it is in real life.
Yeah. I'm amazed when I look at your paintings. I can almost smell the ocean. I can feel the movement of the water. They're just stunning.
Oh, thank you.
Another part of your work is pet portraits, and I would love to explore this with you because this is even more than painting the ocean. I mean, your ocean paintings bring out a sense. When I see them, it evokes my ocean experiences, but with a pet portrait, you're capturing something so deep and personal for the person who commissions the portrait. And I would love for you to talk about creating a portrait for someone who loves their animal and how you capture the spirit and the personality of the animal.
Yeah, I mean, that is, whenever I'm creating a pet portrait, that is the single most important thing that I'm trying to get across in the drawing. That individual pet's personality and the connection that they have with their family. I've grown up with pets all my life. I had rabbits growing up, and then I had a dog from the age of 8, I think it was, and I have a dog now as well. So I kind of know how each animal is so individual and unique, and and it's a lot of the pet portraits that I do are where pets have passed away, and it's so devastating. It's like losing a member of your family. So being entrusted by a client to create a memorial portrait of that pet is just so special, So before I even draw anything, I like to get lots of different photos from the client, sometimes videos as well, because videos give you so much information about a pet. I remember I drew a couple of flat coat retrievers for a client in America, and they were telling me how like energetic they were and how they love swimming, and she sent me this video of this dog absolutely flying across the bank of this lake and then flying down this jetty and just taking this huge leap straight into the lake, and it was just so happy, this dog, and you're like, okay, this dog loves the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just such a lively, energetic dog. Yeah, and I also get the clients to tell me about the pet themselves, all their experiences with it, the background, maybe they had it from a puppy, maybe it came from like a rescue shelter or something. And so you learn a lot about the pet and the client's personal relationship with the pet through just speaking to them. And then all that kind of feeds into the portrait to help me capture their true likeness.
It must be amazing to then, once you've done all that preparation and all those many, many hours, I'm sure it takes many hours to finish a portrait like yours. It's so detailed again. Then to present that to the pet owner, especially if they've lost a pet, it must be an emotional thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my pet portraits are posted out, so often I don't see the first reaction, but occasionally if they're local they do come and collect it, and yeah, that's really special when I do get to present it in person. And yeah, a lot of people are quite overwhelmed. I've had a few tears when I've presented pet portraits, which then makes me well up as well. Because it's just so special knowing how much it means to them, so yeah, it's definitely the most rewarding thing I've ever done, capturing people's pets in portraits.
How did you start with this arm of your business?
I didn't even know that pet portraits were a thing until I was just scrolling through Instagram one day, and I just saw this picture of a dog, and I was like, oh, that's a really cute dog. And then I looked at the caption and I realised that it was a drawing that someone had done. I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And then I looked at her profile and I saw that she was a pet portrait artist. And for me, growing up with his dad as an artist, art was kind of landscapes or seascapes or abstract. I didn't really know that there was a pet portrait thing,
genre.
Yeah, genre, yeah. And anyway, so that really inspired me, and having a dog myself as well, I started doing more drawings of pets, of dogs and cats and that, and then friends and family started asking me if I would draw their pets as well, and it just sort of grew from there, really. I set up a little Facebook page and a website, and then I was getting complete strangers asking me to draw their pets.
Yeah. Again, I'm just staggered by the detail in your paintings, and maybe this is something you achieve just because of the media and the patience it must take, but just, all the different hairs on the dogs are visible, and also you have in the same way that you've captured all the light and the foam and all those details on the ocean, you've captured the movement of the hair, and it's fascinating to see.
Yeah, I draw all my pet portraits in pastels, so my oceanscapes are painted in oil paints. Okay. Because that just kind of suits that subject better. But with pastels, being a dry medium, they naturally have quite a soft, almost fluffy sort of texture to them. And it just works so well for fur. And also you have so much more control as well, which means that I can really capture everything in, minute detail, which I think is quite important with pet portraits, because every pet has their own little features, like they might have a little pink splodge on their nose or some little, grey hairs on their eyebrows or something, and those are those little things that make that pet. So
do you have to work very large to be able to get those details in?
No, not really. I mean, it depends on the pet and what the client wants. So if it's just a head and shoulders portrait, then I can do a detailed 8 by 10 inch portrait.
Okay, wow.
If they want something, if it's like a bigger dog, or they want like a full body portrait or maybe more than one pet, then I go up to sort of 18 by 24 inches. Okay. I have done some larger than that, but those, and then I have sort of sizes in between as well. So yeah, I always like to give people a range of sizes, because I've done Chihuahuas and I've done British Bulldogs and I've done horses, so kind of
Have
suits
you ever-
different
Have you ever
subjects.
met the animals? Do you meet the animals?
Oh yeah,
sometimes?
quite often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had people bring their pets around for me to meet, and sometimes I've gone over to clients' houses to meet their pets. So yeah, it's always nice when that happens because
Yeah.
you get to actually
You've
meet
been
them in
with-
person, and yeah, no,
It's an
nice.
interesting feeling, isn't it, when you've painted something and then you see it in real life? I mean, it's different because dogs have so much, I mean, it's like connecting with a human. There's so much personality there. But I've had the experience of painting something and then painting it before I've seen it in real life. And it's quite a thrill to have that experience of seeing something you've spent so many hours on.
Yeah, quite often it's the other way round. Quite often I meet them first and then I
Okay.
paint them,
Okay.
which is quite helpful because then also I can take my own photos as well. And getting to meet them first allows me to have an even better insight into their personality. But yeah, sometimes I've done the portrait and then they've come down to Cornwall to collect it and they've brought their dog with them, and that's been really nice as well.
I wonder what the dogs think. Does the dog ever see the portrait?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes they look at it and they're like, "Oh, that looks a bit like me."
That's so adorable.
Yeah, quite often my clients will get their pet to pose next to their portrait. That's always quite nice.
So sweet. Tell me about your workspace. So how do you work? What does your workspace look like? Do you have your own special art room? I want to hear all about your creative process.
Yeah, so I claimed the biggest room in the house, aside from our living room, for my art studio. It's got a massive window that's south facing, so I get lots of natural sunlight. And yeah, it is literally just a room in my house, so I get to work from home. My dog is on his bed right at my feet, which is nice. So he snores away while I'm drawing.
Yeah. And how are you set up? Do you stand when you're painting? Do you sit? Are you working on an easel or flat on the table?
Definitely on an easel. And I vary it whether I'm sat down or standing up, just because otherwise if you're working in the same position all the time, my posture gets a bit bad and then then my shoulders suffer, so I sort of try and vary it. My husband actually made me a really good table easel.
Okay.
Because I was having shoulder problems from the setup that I used before, and he came into my studio one day and he was like, "Is that how you draw?" Because I was like, hunched over. He was like, "No wonder your shoulder's hurting." And so then he went into the garage, found some bits of wood. He's really creative. He's like an engineer, and he sees a problem and he manages to come up with some ingenious solution for it.
I love that. I love those people.
Yeah, it's very handy. So he created me this brilliant adjustable table easel that has these legs that brace against the wall so it doesn't move. So it kind of takes all the tension out of my shoulders. And then I also have an easel for if I'm standing up, and I can adjust the height of that. So sometimes I sit down on like a bar stool and draw. Sometimes I stand up. And I've also got a height adjustable desk as well. So yeah, all the adjustment.
Yeah.
It's useful when you're working on different scales, because if I'm working on a really big piece, then quite often I do need to stand up for it. Because if I'm sat down, I'm having to like reach quite high up with my arm, and it just doesn't work.
How long does one of those incredibly detailed portraits take you to finish?
Well, depending on the size, they can take a few weeks.
Yeah.
One of the things I find hard is actually knowing when to stop. I have one of these brains that just wants to keep going, making it finer and finer in detail.
Yeah.
And so I have to be quite strict with myself of knowing when to stop, because sometimes you can go too far. So
I'm interested in your relationship with color, because your color, like your ocean colors, are so incredibly accurate, and I imagine that the pet portraits need to be really accurate as well. And I'm fascinated with color myself, and I'm interested in your relationship with color, and is it important to you, and color mixing and all the things related to color.
Yeah, I think colour is incredibly important. There've been quite a lot of studies as well showing how different colours evoke different emotions in people, haven't there? So I think blue is supposed to be really calming and sort of evokes a feeling of trust, I think. And green is like really kind of grounded, and then red is kind of a bit more lively and, or can mean danger for some people. So yeah, I think colour is really important. In terms of my artwork, I mean, definitely with pet portraits, it's really important to get the colours accurate, because if it's not going to look like their pet. But that poses its own challenges when you're working from photographs, because depending on the type of lighting that the photograph has been taken in, it can drastically affect how the colours look. So sometimes if I get photographs where the colours look quite different between the different photos, I'll go back to the client and I'll say which one is actually true to your pet's colouring, and then they can point me in the right direction. Cats' eyes are quite difficult because quite often they look, they can look yellow or green in different lighting when I've drawn black cats. So again, I have to sort of defer to the owner and find out what's accurate. But yeah, I always say to people, if they take photographs in natural lighting, then that helps.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually mixing with pastels, you have to mix colours actually on the page. So
I was wondering about
quite
that.
often, yeah. So obviously with oil paints, you mix them on the palette and get them to the hue that you want, and then you transfer it to the canvas. But with pastels, it's a question of layering different colours actually on the page. So sometimes it takes a little while and a bit of trial and error. I always have a scrap bit of pastel mat, that's the surface that I use, where I sort of scribble on there and try and get the colours right before I can start the portrait.
What does your range of pastels look like? Do you have a whole range, or are you just adept with the mixing by now?
Oh, there's hundreds of pastels.
Are they they're not oil pastels, they're chalk?
They're chalk
chalky?
Pastels, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And the trouble is I'm always buying new different ones as well, because I get excited by new materials. So then I kind of get used to one combination, and then when I'm replenishing my stock, and then I see these other colours and I end up buying them, and then my collection just grows and just makes it even more complicated and difficult to navigate. I probably should simplify, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Do you have a good art supply store in your town?
No, I used to, and they shut down, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I buy all my stuff online now.
Okay. That's maybe useful, because once you're once you're in the store, it's hard to control yourself.
Oh yeah, you get all excited. I'm like a kid in a sweet shop, and I just want to buy everything. I'm like that online anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I remember many years ago when I was very young, I went to London to live for a bit, and I can't remember the name of the store, but I went into this old, atmospheric, really romantic, beautiful art supply store. It was the kind of thing like, I don't know, like the Hogwarts version of an art supply store, It was just all wooden and just colours everywhere. And it really impressed itself on me, this memory of just, it really was like a chocolate store, but for art supplies. It was just a beautiful memory.
Yeah. I actually, my pastel drawer, so I arranged them in, my pastel sticks, I arranged them in trays, and I've kind of got them in like a colour spectrum order.
Yeah, great.
So just opening up the drawer and seeing them all there just makes me ridiculously happy.
Yeah.
Because it looks so beautiful.
Is it a feeling of like potential, like what can I do with this, or just a joy-filled like colour celebration?
I think it's both, really. It's like a kaleidoscope of colours, but then, like you said, the potential for all the things you could create with them. Yeah. Yeah.
It must be an amazing thing to see, to have a client say, I want you to recreate my beloved pet, and then to have it sort of come to life, because you really are bringing life to these paintings. It must be an
Yeah.
amazing feeling. Like just taking those simple pastel colors and then making life out of them.
I feel like as soon as you get the eyes in on a drawing, that's when it really comes to life.
I was going
Because
to
there's
ask
so
you about
much.
that. Yeah. Well, I have a friend who paints birds and she always leaves the eyes till last. And to me, that's like the scariest thing you could do because if you get the eyes wrong, the whole thing is wrong. But if you get the eyes right, you can continue to fix the rest of it or get, the eyes are what's it.
Yeah.
So the fact that she puts the eyes in last terrifies me. But I'm interested in your process. Do you put them in first? How does that go?
Well, because pastels can smudge if you end up resting your hand on them. I end up working from top left to bottom right because I'm right-handed.
Okay.
When I started out and I worked with colour pencil, that's less of a problem. So I did draw the eyes first then. But for pastels, it just doesn't really work because you draw the eyes and then you'd end up smudging it with your hand trying to draw the ear,
Yeah.
So that's how I work. But usually that does mean I end up getting the eyes in fairly quick, within sort of the first day of drawing.
Okay.
And I've never had to start something again because of the eyes.
Okay.
I think because pastels are actually quite forgiving, it's quite easy to rectify things that don't look quite right. I do spend an insane amount of time doing the eyes compared to the rest of the portrait for the amount of space they take up on the page.
Yeah.
I spend hours just doing these tiny little areas.
Yeah. It is amazing, isn't it? Because life comes through the eyes and that's what we look at. That's how we relate to another person or an animal. We look in their eyes. How is that? How do you build up those glassy? Because I guess it's just like paying close attention to the darks and the lights, but getting the glassiness and the sheen must be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it is all just like a layering process as well. And when you are layering stuff up, you are intrinsically building depth in the drawing anyway. And getting the glassiness is sort of just putting very light shades very lightly over those coloured layers that you built up.
Mm-hmm. Do you have to fix it with anything? Any sort of spray fixative or something like that?
No, so I tried it back in the early days, and I just found it would blur all the details together. So all those really fine details would just be lost, and it would darken a lot of the colours, so they'd lose their vibrance, and it just made everything look really flat. So sometimes you might want that if it's for a background, and you want to make it look quite matte. So whenever I've done matte black backgrounds, fixative works quite well for that, especially because then it stops you actually then transferring the black onto then what you're about to draw on top of it. So it does have its uses, but in general, no, I don't use it.
Yeah. You mentioned back in the day you were doing that technique. I'm always interested in people's development through time and how techniques change, and that things you pick up, things you leave behind because they no longer interest you or serve you. How's your art practice changed over time?
When I got back into art again, I think I was about 30, so about 8 years ago now, and I was just trying everything because I didn't really know what my style was. When I was at college, you're kind of or school even, you're encouraged to just try a bit of everything, so I hadn't ever really worked on my style or done art for me consistently. So I was trying colour pencils, I was trying oil paints, I was trying pastels, which incidentally I hated the first time.
Really? Tell me about that.
Yeah.
What did you hate about it, and how did that come to be one of your favourites?
Well, I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I just got a set of pastel pencils because I'd been using colour pencils, and I found out that you could get pastels in pencil form. So I thought, okay, well that won't be too much of a leap then. And I did get some pastel sticks as well, but I started off with the pastel pencils, and I just tried it on normal printer paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to draw this pony on printer paper. And of course, none of the pastels stuck to the paper. It just smudged everywhere. I didn't really know anything about colour mixing, so everything just kind of turned to mud. And it just looked awful. And I was like, how does anyone work with these? But then a little voice in my head was like, well, you're obviously doing something wrong, because I was seeing all these incredible pieces on Instagram. And I was like, I'm just missing something. I don't know what it is, but I'm missing something. So then I was just trawling loads of YouTube tutorials and learning more about the materials and techniques and stuff. And then bit by bit,
it came together.
Yeah. So I tried a few different pastel papers. So I tried like a textured surface first, which I had better results with, but still wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then I learned about sanded pastel paper.
Tell me about that. I don't know about that.
Yeah, so pastels, they're just kind of a coloured pigment that's held together with this binder. And the softer the pastel, the less binder there is. So they're quite crumbly and quite, create quite a lot of dust. So you need a surface that literally grips that dust and holds onto it. So if you're just using normal printer paper like I was, it just doesn't work. And the textured paper is good if you're doing sort of light sketches with not many layers on. But if you want, more than a couple of layers, again, you just get loads of dust and the paper doesn't really grab the pastel. So with sanded papers, you can build up lots and lots of layers, and that's how you get these really realistic drawings. So that was a real game changer for me.
Yeah. And do you have a do you lean towards oil or pastel, or do you have a favorite?
I think pastels are my favorite, just because I love working with oil paints when I'm working with them, but I really hate the clear up afterwards.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, because I work with watercolor and it's so simple. It's just completely, it's done in 1 minute. But I know that I experimented a little bit in, high school art class with oil, and it was just so messy.
Yeah, it is messy, and you get it all over your hands, and then you have to use solvents to get it off, which isn't great, for your skin and everything. And they take so long to dry as well, which can be a bit of a pain, especially for storage reasons if you're short on space,
Yeah.
So I don't do many oil paintings anymore. I tend to try and lean towards pastels, but it's interesting you say about watercolors, because I am actually trying to learn watercolors at the moment.
Okay.
And finding them really hard.
Really? What is feeling hard about it? It's opposite, isn't it? It's opposite to oils and I assume pastels, in that you have to do the lightest layers first and the darkest last. It's that
and having to leave the whites. Mm-hmm. So having to preserve the white of the paper for your highlights. Yeah. Which obviously takes quite a lot of skill and forethought.
Yeah, you have to kind of make a plan ahead of time. You have to think, okay, I'm going to do this and then this and then this. I'm not sure if it's the same with oil.
No, with oils, if you want a highlight, it's the last thing that you do. And because they're opaque, and the same with pastels, you just draw in your highlight and it's there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, obviously, you've seen from the way I work, I like to have minute control over everything.
Yeah.
And watercolors just don't work like that. The paint does its own thing quite a lot of the time, doesn't it? So, which is why I'm sort of trying to learn them to sort of force myself to be a little bit more free with my art and get a little bit more of a painterly element into my work. But it's just trying to get my brain to accept that the paint's going to do what the paint's going to do and to be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always fascinated with an artist's style and whether it reflects their personality. And I wonder, for you, is your style incredibly meticulous and detailed style? Do you live your life in that way? Do you have attention to detail in other areas of your life?
Yeah, I do, definitely. I like to, I'm quite particular about things. I think my husband would probably be the best person to ask about this. I think in my head, I think I'm more easygoing than I am, but in reality, he'd probably say no. You're quite picky about things. So yeah, my art is probably a good reflection of my personality, I'd say.
And when you're doing something really detailed, I'm wondering, I don't know, for my personality, I often like to have different things on the go, and I'm wondering if when you're immersed in, you know, a painting that takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, do you just work on one thing at a time, or do you have different things on the go to sort of change up the mood and the style and jump from one thing to the next?
I have tried that, but for me, I think I like to just be concentrating on one thing, because I really do get in the zone with it, and it's not just when I'm drawing, when I'm actually not drawing, you know, when I'm walking my dog or whatever, I'll still be thinking about it and thinking about the next bit, or maybe what I need to adjust on bits I've already drawn, and my mind will just be constantly sort of churning over the artwork in my head, you know, and how it's coming together. So I think if I was working on more than one at a time, I would just get a little bit confused. I feel like I wouldn't. I think I would struggle a bit.
Zone, in that flow state with one. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the only time I tried doing more than one at a time was when I was doing a particularly big piece, and I had quite a bad shoulder at the time, so I was having to mix up working on the larger one, which was quite hard on my shoulder, to working on a smaller one. But I sort of scheduled it such that they were using the same color palette, because they were very similar looking dogs in terms of the colours of their fur and that.
That's
so
useful.
It was quite easy switching between one and the other, because I didn't have to get out a whole new colour palette, you know. It was the same materials. But yeah, I do definitely find that I like to be in the headspace for one piece at a time.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to talk about the idea of a connection between time in nature and a motivation to protect wildlife. I'm wondering for you about this connection, and how creativity and time in nature helps this love of nature and a desire to protect wildlife.
Yeah. I think so much I could talk about with this. I think if you spend time in nature, you can't help but see how it's struggling. Yeah. And I remember from when I was a little kid, and we used to go up on the downs, and they would have these massive like meadows of flowers, and I remember me and my brother would be running through them trying to catch the butterflies, and there were just hundreds of butterflies everywhere. I just remember it absolutely teeming with them. And now when I go home to see my parents, and you go up to that same place, and there's hardly any there, and it's really sad.
Yeah.
And I also remember driving along, and when I was a kid, you know, my dad driving, and there would be so many like bug splats on the windscreen.
Yeah,
you know,
I remember that.
And
too.
now you just don't get it now, and you kind of think, well, that's, you know, where have they all gone? And you know, with like farming practices here now, and like the intensive use of pesticides and stuff, and it's all having such an effect on on the local wildlife, and then climate change as well. And I was listening to another podcast about, I can't remember if it was swallows or swifts, but they've been tracking them, and they swoop around in the air and have to catch hundreds of insects each day to feed themselves and their young. And they were tracking these birds that were flying as far as Germany to get enough
find insects.
food, to get enough insects, and then flying back to their nest.
Oh my goodness!
Because there just weren't enough around in the in their local area in the UK. Yeah, and being in the ocean as well, like you see so much plastic pollution there. Just like where I live here, but also other places I've been. So I spoke about the Maldives earlier, where I went on my honeymoon, and it kind of looks like this pristine sort of place on the surface, but that's because whenever you stay in the resorts there, you've got this whole team of staff going around clearing everything up, making everything look pristine.
Sure. Yeah.
Then when you actually look a little bit closer, I remember there was a storm one of the days, and I started noticing these plastic bottles on the beach, and so me and my husband went over and we started like picking them up, and we were picking up like dozens of them, and I was like, where have they come from? And then I suddenly realised that they were actually coming from the sea. So the sea was just washing them up, like this huge tide of just plastic coming in from the sea, being washed up on the beach. And it was just devastating. You just feel awful. Like, I mean, we came back from Costa Rica in February as well, and we were snorkeling, and there was all these fishes around. But then in amongst all the fishes, you just saw so many bits of plastic floating around as well. And you think, well, they're going to be eating that. There's so many instances of like whales and dolphins and that being washed up on our beaches here, and seabirds, and their bellies are just full of plastic, you know. And it's just heartbreaking. So yeah, I think as an artist whose inspiration is animals and the natural world, and you're seeing all this stuff happening around you, you can't not want to do something to help, you know. You kind of feel like it's your duty to try and use your art in a positive way to help that which inspires it. Yeah.
How do you think artists can do that on a more consistent basis? How can we use art to make change, to help motivate people to make change and do better and live in a more sustainable way?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few ways, I think. It's hard as well because I find you're constantly trying to tread this fine line between inspiring people but also not wanting to depress people.
Yes.
Because if you're always talking about all the bad things, then people sort of get this sense of hopelessness, and I've felt it quite a few times before as well. And you sort of feel like, oh God, we're all doomed. Like, what's the point? You know, and it can feel quite overwhelming. So it's trying to sort of walk this fine line between celebrating our natural world, but also highlighting where we need to do better. Yes. So some of it is simply raising awareness, because there's lots of things that people can do in their own lives to make a change, like, you know, by opting for things that don't use single-use plastics. You know, if people can afford to buy organic food, then that uses a lot less pesticides.
Yes.
And then also working with conservation charities. So a lot of my work has contributed to movements by various conservation charities to help the projects that they do.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I've done a few different things. So I actually live right next door to a hedgehog rescue centre.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah, so they're called Prickles and Paws. And
no, that's too cute.
Yeah. And they're incredible people. They literally work day in, day out, 7 days a week, taking in sick and injured hedgehogs from all around the southwest. And I think last year they had about 1,300 hedgehogs coming through their door that they helped. And they literally just run it out of their house. So they have all these incubators set up, and they have these dedicated outbuildings in their garden. They call them hospitals. And that's where they treat and care for these hedgehogs. So
that melts
I did a collaboration with them last year, and I drew a couple of their hedgehog patients. And
oh wow!
Yeah, we used the artwork to help raise some money for them. So yeah, that was quite a nice little thing.
That's beautiful.
And then recently, I was, or a couple of years running, I've been involved with Wildlife Artist of the Year, which is run by the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, and they're a UK-based conservation charity that work across Africa and Asia, protecting endangered species. So it's a big event that every year draws, I think, over 1,000 artists together who all submit artwork, and then that goes into a big exhibition, and 50% of the money goes towards wildlife conservation projects run by them.
That's a really great way to be involved, make change.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I would love to talk about something you recently did, a big adventure that you've come back
Yeah.
from. The sailing in tall ships up the Baltic Sea as part of International Tall Ships Race. Tell me about this and about the ways that art was part of that experience.
Yeah, so I recently partook in the International Tall Ships Race, and I was sailing on a Class A tall ship called the Roald Amundsen. And a Class A tall ship is basically, if you imagine the ships in Pirates of the Caribbean, that's kind of what they look like. They've got these massive square sails, and you get to climb up the rigging and set the sails, and yeah, it's quite a spectacle, and yeah, they're really exciting to sail on. So there was a crew of 48 of us on board. It's run entirely by volunteers.
Yeah.
So me and my brother and a friend, we were part of the crew, and yeah, we sailed on race 2. There's 3 races in the whole event. So we were part of race 2, sailing from Estonia to Finland across the Baltic Sea. Yeah, and it was incredible.
What kind of seas did you encounter? What was the conditions
luckily
like?
it was fairly calm. I did get quite seasick for the first 24 hours.
Yeah.
So the start of the race, I had to climb right to the top of the mast to help set the sails, and it was a little bit choppy, so the boat was swaying side to side and pitching forwards and backwards as well. So I was I was rolling about the top of this mast. And yeah, by the time I got down, I was feeling a bit queasy, and then that persisted for a few hours. But after that, the seas calmed down quite a lot, and we had really good winds. There was one point where we were completely becalmed, and so the captain said, "Well, there's not much we can do with no wind, so we'll build a swimming pool on the deck."
What?
So,
how did you do that? That sounds amazing.
Yeah, we had these 4 trestle tables which we lashed together with a big strap, and then we put a tarpaulin in the middle, and they had this generator which could pump seawater into the top. So we made the swimming pool. We had about 16 of the crew lounging in the swimming pool on deck. Yeah, it was good fun. I think one of the best things about the tall ships for me was that being properly at sea, like away from land, you couldn't even see any land. You know, you look at 360 degrees and it was just ocean.
Yeah.
No phone signal. I mean, I switched my phone off when I boarded the ship anyway and just chucked it in my bag, and I was like, that's, done. I'm off grid.
Yeah.
Done with that.
Wonderful.
And I just remember feeling so my brain just completely was able to switch off from everything.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do when you're in your everyday life. Even you might get a few minutes of it when you go out for a dog walk or whatever, but then as soon as you come home, your phone's buzzing.
You're back on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're back on, and it was just so nice to have that few days of just being completely out in the ocean and just not having anything to worry about. And I came back feeling so zen.
Yeah.
Just so like calm and relaxed, and like I could just take my time with everything, and I wasn't having to like rush here and rush there and do this and do that. And my brain just felt so rested. It was brilliant. And my favourite memory is being at the top of the mast, and the sun was setting, and we were starting to go through the archipelago around Finland. So it's the biggest archipelago in the world. So you've got all these islands dotted around you, and the sun was setting just behind this island with a little lighthouse on it. And it was just the most serene, beautiful, stunning experience ever. And I just felt so peaceful. And I was like, I don't want this to end. And that was the last day of our voyage, and I was like, was so happy but so sad at the same time that it was coming to an end.
Yeah. I love those moments when something is just so exquisitely like poetic or picturesque and serene that you just kind of store it inside yourself for later so you can dip into it when you need it.
It's definitely an image in my mind that I will never forget. Like, that will definitely stay with me forever. And then when I think of it, that same feeling of like calm serenity like comes over me as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you have a chance to sketch in your sketchbooks while you were at sea?
Well, so the other part of the adventure was that the airline lost my baggage on the way there.
No.
which had all my art stuff in it.
Oh no.
So I was gutted. So I ended up having to basically do the entire voyage with just a tiny little rucksack that I had on me on the plane with just a few little essential items in it. So all the gear that I had bought, especially
Carefully
for the
packed.
voyage, I didn't have any of it.
Oh.
So members of the crew were having to lend me clothing and various things. So but I was a bit gutted because I'd taken like a watercolor set with me and I was hoping to do some painting and stuff, but didn't have any of it with me, unfortunately. So I was sad. But I got some cool photos, so I'm hoping to do some sketches from the photos.
Do you ever paint outdoors, or is it mostly indoors?
I do some painting outdoors, but not kind of. It's more stuff for me, just as kind of. I find it quite relaxing, even though it is my job. I still love to create in my spare time as well.
Yeah.
So quite often I'll sit in the garden and sketch my dog or some flowers and the beach and stuff. So but it's usually just for me, like my own personal sketchbook.
Tell me about your sketchbook practice. So sketchbooks are such an amazing tool for learning, for planning. I wonder if you plan out your paintings in a sketchbook, or is it just for play?
Bit of both, really. Sometimes if I have an idea that I'm not sure how to realize it, I'll do a series of sketches that just kind of helps me almost get my thoughts down on the page. Sometimes something in my head, when you kind of get it down the page, I'm like, oh, that's not really going to work, or I might change things. So preliminary sketches I quite like to do. And then once I've kind of got the vague idea down, I'll then try and get reference photos together to make that thing come to life. And then when I'm happy with that on the computer, then I start drawing it. So it's kind of a bit of a process. And things tend to evolve quite a lot along the way. Just in the act of sketching something out, sometimes ideas come to you of elements that you can put in. So for instance, when I was a finalist in Wildlife Artist of the Year this year, I did a elephant drawing, and it was this big bull elephant coming out of these dust clouds, and that was a piece that took quite a lot of iterations, if you like, of trying to figure out how the idea was going to work, because I basically wanted to create a piece that portrayed this bull elephant in a slightly intimidating kind of setting.
Yes.
I wanted to create a lot of drama and energy and movement and size, and I wasn't really sure how to do that. So it took quite a lot of sketches, and eventually I came up with this idea of this thing kind of charging out of these dust clouds, because I thought, well, the dust clouds kind of give it a bit of an ominous feel because this thing's kind of emerging from them. It gives it some energy and movement. And drama, and but that all came about through having the idea in my head and then sketching out on paper and just evolving until I sort of had the idea how I wanted it.
Yeah. And tell me about the future and what you hope. So you mentioned that you're keen to start exploring watercolor. Are there anything? Is there any other things that you're really excited about exploring in your art practice in the future?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Like I said before, I'm trying to sort of introduce a bit more of a painterly element into my work as well, alongside the realistic style that I do.
Yeah.
So at the moment I've been experimenting with doing some more kind of painterly backgrounds, and then the subject is more in my realistic style. So I've been quite having fun playing with different mediums for the backgrounds. I recently got a set of Derwent ink tents. I don't know if you've used that.
Yeah, I have some, but really I haven't figured out what I'm doing yet. There's a nature journal educator called Alex Boone, and he does amazing work with this. He's also in the UK, and maybe if you're interested to watch his videos, he's got he's got a whole explanation about how to use Inktense, and I haven't yet watched it,
brilliant.
but it's on my do next
What's his name?
list. Alex Boone.
Yeah, I'll have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like them. They're sort of like watercolor, sort of like inks, and sort of like pastels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got the set of sticks, so you can draw with them like pastels and then wet them, or you can use them like watercolors by wetting the brush and then using them like watercolor pans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're really bright colors, and once they set, they're permanent, so you can
Paint over.
Get some quite cool effects. Yeah, kind of layering up the paint.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, having quite a lot of fun with those at the moment.
I'm interested. I always think about play, the idea of play, and how important that is. And it sounds like there's a lot of room for play in your experiments that you've been doing with this new media.
Yeah, and I think even through just playing like that and doing little studies, just for me, it does actually have a way of working its way back into all the other art that I create.
Yeah.
So, for instance, one of the pieces that I did recently with the Inktense, combining it with pastels, I did the background in sort of like these pinky purpley colours, and then I drew a chimpanzee on top of that background, and I made all the colours of the chimpanzee sort of quite pinky and purpley.
Yeah.
And I found that actually doing the shadow areas, not using any greys at all, I basically, because whenever I draw black dogs or pets or whatever, I tend to use like blue greys and blacks, and it's all just quite grey, So this time I was like, no, I'm just going to use like purples and blues and see how that works, and maybe some like pinks for like the highlights. And I really liked how much more colourful it was, and how much more depth it added to the piece, rather than looking a bit monochrome.
Yeah.
And then the next pet portrait I did was actually a black Cocker Spaniel. So I thought, okay, this is all in pastels, but I'm going to be really strict to myself, and I'm not going to use any greys. I'm just going to use purples and blues for the shadow areas, and then for the highlights, I use pinks and like yellows, and it just made the piece pop so much more. And that was through playing around with Inktense, So yeah, I think play is really important for your own kind of artistic development. It teaches you new things and kind of helps you progress and evolve.
Absolutely. Naomi, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, and for opening a little window into the way you see the world, your connection with nature, and how that's been meaningful to you. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Naomi. I really liked hearing about the details of her fine art practice. I could imagine the hundreds of pastels all arranged in colours and how inspiring that must be. I also loved the way Naomi uses her art to make change and help wildlife. I've put the links in the show notes to where you can connect with Naomi and see her pieces. Follow the links and you can find her entry into the Wildlife Artist of the Year competition, which is absolutely stunning. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.